Breaking down silos, driving collaboration, and aligning efforts towards a singular goal is Lori Kiel's mission. She's Chief Commercial Officer at the Kessler Collection, and she's obsessed with commercial strategy. I've invited her on to ask her questions about why is she comparing commercial strategy to a triathlon? Why is this evolution happening right now? And what's her best advice to help hoteliers get in the game right now? You're not going to want to miss this one. Check it out. Hi, Lori. Thank you for joining me on a Monday.
Thank you for having me on a Monday. What a way to start the week, right?
All right into it. I know we've had a little sidebar ready to go in here already, so I can't wait for our conversation. I want to introduce Lori Kiel. She is Chief Commercial Officer for Kessler Collection out at Orlando. So welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm going to get right at it as because of our viewership attention span is at razor thin margins these days. So I'm so curious. I read your article on LinkedIn and you were comparing commercial strategy to a triathlon. So can you enlighten us? Why do you compare it to a triathlon?
Yeah, because these things, I don't know why they occur to me just being someone that is a runner and had a good running career there for a while. I recognize that how much training goes into being a runner, right? So if I just start from that point of view, like there is a lot of training in order to get to a half marathon or a marathon. You're putting a lot of time in and you're paying attention to all of those pieces of that puzzle, that your nutrition, your pace, your lactate, all of the lactic acid, all of that. And then somewhere along the way, someone says, hey, would you like to do a triathlon with me? I know you're a runner. And I'm like, but I'm not a swimmer and I'm not a biker. But that's okay. That's okay. You don't need to be. You can do it because you're a runner. As long as you can swim and as long as you can bike, you can do it. And I thought to myself, this is not that different. With commercial strategy, what we attempt to do is we put sales and revenue and marketing under one leadership umbrella. And in that organization, we still need people to be experts. We need runners, right? So I need sales to be an expert in sales, and I need revenue to be an expert in revenue, and I need marketing to be an expert in marketing. And if all three of them are working towards one common goal where they can intersect intermittently, we're going to optimize our revenue and our expenses beyond what we could do singularly. So much like the triathlon, if I've got a marketer who is an expert and they can dabble a little bit in revenue and sales, we're in the game. We're headed towards the finish line. Then in the end, we're all going to be winners versus this isolation that we've had for all these years where marketing may win, but revenue's sitting on the side going, it's not converting. So good for you that it's awareness, it's not converting. So to me, that's where the analogy sits.
As somebody that's familiar with other industries, I get the sense, as much like our beloved hospitality industry, a lot of things in this industry are new and unique. Other businesses that we work with, they're all aligned. Is this siloed scenario only in hospitality? And why has it been like that? Or why did it just start that way?
I think, yes, it did start that way. Early on, sales has always been a thing, right? Like we've been selling since traveling salesmen, right? So sales has always been a thing. And then marketing came along. In hospitality, though, specific to the brands especially, if you were franchised through Marriott or IHG or Hilton, you were really only focused on sales in the early years. In the 80s and the 90s, you had a sales team. You didn't have a marketing team because typically the brand did your marketing for you.
Right.
So these two things did not talk because one lived here in a corporate office and the other was on property. Well, then come into the 90s, we get revenue management into the picture. And they're trying to find their way. They're trying to figure out who do they align under. For a long time, revenue management sat under sales until we all realized that was an incredible conflict of interest. And then somewhere along the way, right around the time when you saw the OTAs start to take shape, marketing ended up coming back into the fringe with sales and now revenue, because somebody had to be paying attention to these online platforms, these websites, these vanity sites, all these things that really couldn't be miles away in a corporate office. So they were originally built as 3 silos. That is how it was put together. Revenue had their work, sales had theirs, and marketing had theirs. I think as we got into the 2000s, the late 2000s, you started to see sales and revenue finding a parallel rather than this alignment that was more vertically challenged, in that now revenue was saying, wait a minute, sales, just because you have a lead doesn't mean I have to take it, because I know that this weekend I can get more rate for these transient guests coming. And so all of a sudden you started to see where you were either going to battle it out or you were going to work together. And so I believe that's where this convergence has come in. Marketing is really, I believe we're on the tail end of marketing and really coming into play in this commercial strategy. And only because there's this overlap of e-commerce that plays into both sales and revenue. So yes, it was originally siloed. Yes, it was constructed that way. But if you want to get to success in today's environment, it can't be that way. There have to be defined lanes where they understand where they intersect and where they have their guardrails. That's really key to the success of commercial.
I see. A really good setup for this next question. Why now? And I've heard the buzz happening for the last couple of years or so, but it seems like right now has really been hitting, no pun, full stride. And to tie it back in with
I like it. Yeah, why now? I think that in 08 challenged us, right? That recession really put us all in our place. And we found, I know where I was sitting, we were watching people get laid off all the way down the hall. And now all of a sudden, these things that were separate entities were now forced to work together because we didn't have a full workforce. No more was there 4 offices of marketing and 3 offices of sales and 3 revenue teams. It was, in my world, we got down to 2 people. We had to do sales, revenue, and marketing.
Wow.
And so in that group, we started to realize, wait a minute, if I'm doing a revenue meeting and I'm looking at it through the lens of a salesperson, as a revenue person, as a marketer, all of a sudden I'm starting to find these connection points, these points where if I do this, if I take this group and I put that in here, and then I advertise a staycation through marketing, I'm now able to start pushing a rate that otherwise, left to my own devices as a revenue manager, I could never have gotten there on my own. And so I really think that's when you started to see some of it take shape, was in that 08, 09 timeframe. Since then, as we have continued to move into that optimization, we know it's working. And so where you see it working, you're going to create those efficiencies. And you're, in order to stay in the race, if you will, you better get in on your triathlon training. You better get in with the 3 teams. Otherwise, you're likely to be left in the water. And that's not a place any of us want to be. It's a very competitive environment out there. You got to be in it.
Absolutely. Do you see some hesitancy still with?
Absolutely.
Now,
Absolutely.
Why the pushback? To me, optimization, it just seems natural that all 3 of those departments. In fact, what brought my attention to this whole scenario is when I was working with a high-level marketing executive, and she was blown away that I actually had a conversation with sales team as a marketer. And I'm like, why is that strange? And that kind of got my wheels turning, going, it's about problem solution. If we don't know what the problems are, how can we possibly fix that? Could maybe expand on that a little bit more.
Isn't it in our nature at some level that we all like to be in our own sandbox? And God forbid you come in my sandbox and start kicking down my castle. So I think you have to start there. People know what they know. We feel extremely possessive over our expertise. And how dare you tell me or suggest that I can or should do it different? So you just have to look at the place. Let's just talk about human nature and talk about team formation. I know even to this day, and I've been doing this for a lot of years here, that we've had all 3 lined up under one leader. But even to this day, we form, we storm, we get to the norming, and sometimes we're performing. But the minute a player on the team changes, or the minute another platform is thrown our way, we're back into forming again. We're back into storming, because that's just human nature, is that I'm going to say, wait a minute, I've been doing this 30 years. You're not going to tell me. And so this is the place where leadership is really key. You have to have a leader that understands and respects the expertise of all three disciplines equally. And that person becomes really the communicator between the three to say, let me explain to you, marketing person, what I believe revenue management can add to what you're doing, or vice versa. The other thing is you've got to level the playing field. And so all three disciplines are meeting in one meeting where they all have a voice, rather it coming out of a revenue meeting that a marketer's never invited to, but yet they're told, hey, we're doing a staycation in 3 weeks and you need to get it out there because we've got to fill August and now it's your problem. That's never going to work. Those things still happen in today's world, though. It's not perfect, but the resistance is that it really takes the leadership and a willingness by the leader to manage all three of these disciplines interdependently and together.
Wonderful. Do you see this becoming, are you beginning to win over some of the old guard based on our...
There's no doubt about it. It's not going away.
No, that's great.
No, you're starting to see the brands are now, the brands are starting to adopt it. And that's big with the brands because they're behemoths. And if you go look at Marriott headquarters, that's a lot of people and they are definitely they're discipline specific, right? But now you're starting to hear them talk about commercial. There's the talk of a commercial certification coming out soon.
Oh, wow.
You see a lot of the associations are starting to speak about commercials. This is not going away. This is one of those things that you're either going to have to get on or you're going to be left behind.
Yeah. And it's funny thing you had mentioned about the brands, and no one necessarily wants to put themselves out there, right? The industry is not necessarily built on risk takers. Is that kind of the trigger, is when you see some of the brands switching? And that's actually one of the things that Tom had mentioned in his post is even Hilton is doing some really fun, engaging IG reels and some things that you wouldn't necessarily be on brand anymore. So is that kind of the settling point? Is, oh, well, XYZ brand's doing it, I guess we can do it now type of thing?
That's a big deal. It is a very big deal because, again, you have a lot of owners out there that are not operators.
Right.
They have management agreements where they have third parties managing their properties. So to be able to convince the owners that this is the way, not only because I say it, but because look at what Marriott's doing, look at what Hilton's doing. That's a big push. And we need that. We need them to get behind what we also believe. The other side of it is, it's the old saying, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you always got. And if what you were getting was good, why change it? My fear, though, is that because so much of what we're doing is aligned with the new tech, the new digital, the new AI, that if you don't get in the game, you're going to be so far behind that catching up could hurt, right? So that what you always got may be a whole lot less if you're not getting on the front side of this.
Oh, you just picked a scab with me, Lori. The whole, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality.
Yeah.
It's been extremely lucrative and great for hospitality for the last, since 2010, once we've begun to cover. So you hit it right on the head, and the reluctance in not realizing what's going to happen if things do soften up a little bit. And we have to compete for business and be a little bit more proactive versus sitting and essentially managing inbound opportunities. Now I got to be a little bit more proactive. And so maybe it's going to take it's the why, right? And I don't blame people for saying, look, I'm busy. I'm already over my head right now. I can't even think about looking at a different strategy or changing up my tactics because it is working right now.
But listen, what proactive is, it's doing today what you know you'll need for tomorrow.
Yes.
We're not doing enough of that, right?
Absolutely.
So in the old days, it was prospecting. You weren't happy that the phone was ringing. You knew you still had to keep making those connections so the phone would continue to ring. Because if you didn't do this, eventually the phone didn't ring. It's not that different today. Our funnels may be filling, but if we're not proactive enough to stay out in front of it, you're going to see that dry up. Because the way that you do it tomorrow is very different than the way you do it today. I see it every single day. Every article that is written is urging us to take notice and realize the way that you do this is changing, and it's going to change again. And so it is very concerning. It's concerning for me as someone who, I'm in the game. I'm in it actively, and I'm in it so far that I'm even willing to take the risks and tell everyone all about our pitfalls. Doesn't bother me a bit because we're growing and we're going to keep pushing. But It's just, there's so much so fast that you're having to literally cherry pick and go, okay, what of this are we willing to do right now for marketing? What of this are we willing to do right now for sales? You don't have that, you don't have the benefit of doing that in all hotel companies or brands, really just based on the organization even. Again, if you have a leader that's a chief marketing officer and they have no revenue knowledge, no sales knowledge, what are you going to do with that leader? They could be 20, 30 years in that career. You're not knocking them out because now you need a chief commercial officer. So this is where you're having to find these hybrid approaches to how do you still get that commercial optimization that you need with the legacy leader that's in the seat.
Love it. I saved the best for last, and I can't wait to hear what's your best advice, Lori, on some hoteliers that may be thinking about commercial, maybe some tips on how to get started.
The very first thing that you need to do is take a look at the job descriptions. You need to pull the job descriptions with the team, and you need to go through and say, okay, what of this is still relevant? What are we doing today that is on this job description that still makes sense? And so what we do is we do this comparative. We look at the job description every year, and I also do a day in the life. So I ask you for 2 weeks, write down every single thing you do every day. Now we're going to compare the two. What do they look like? Is it the same thing? What needs to be changed? What needs to be revised? By doing that, you are then creating the lanes, if you will, so that I can 100% say this is what marketing does, this is what sales does, and this is what revenue does. And it's wholly relevant because we update it every single year. Now, once we get there, we are looking for overlaps and gaps. What things are we doing duplicate and what things are we missing altogether? And then whose lane does that belong in? Once you can set all of that in motion, now as the leader, because I am well aware of what all three on that highway are doing, I then now know how to set the strategy. I know how to write a strategy for sales that will deploy marketing only where they need them. I know how to write a strategy for marketing that keeps them at an awareness level, knowing that I've got consideration and conversion covered over in these other two lanes. Just that one simple exercise of auditing the job description, auditing a day in the life, combining and updating the two, that alone can set you on the right path.
That's fantastic. That's a great place to start. Wonderful. It's been so nice chatting with you just for a few minutes. I can't wait to have a follow-up conversation. I restricted myself on going down some rabbit holes with you. So I'm like, all right, keep on point here.
You're awesome.
Can you just give us a quick overview, a little bit about yourself and where people can find you, by the way?
Yes, Lori Kiel, Chief Commercial Officer of the Kessler Collection, but recently launched our website at lorikiel.com and offering now executive coaching, mastermind, organizational coaching. And the whole idea behind what I'm offering is really just to help people get here. As we've been talking, it's very hard to move from one leadership style to one that oversees three different disciplines. And because I've been doing it as long as I have, and I have tripped and fall and got back up, put some Neosporin on those cuts and am now winning, I'm trying to offer that same thing to many of my colleagues in the industry. So you go to lorikiel.com, that's where you'll find those opportunities. And again, thankful to the Kessler Collection for this fabulous platform to stand on and take these risks. We're really serving the industry as a whole because we're pretty relentless around here and so willing to fail fast, get up and keep moving.
Love that. That's fantastic. Hey, I appreciate you joining me on InSync Show, Lori. And like I said, I look forward to a follow-up conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.